The first bullet ripped through the hills of Wyoming like a storm, soundly and conclusively. Luke Mercer didn't hesitate. He shot again before the first corpse had time to hit the ground. Blood spattered dust, and there was a fleeting instant of stillness. Just wind. Just quiet. 12 years of hiding, of keeping his head down, were destroyed in an instant. He never asked for this. Never did want to be drawn back in. But some types of evil don't give a man a choice. She ran towards him, barefoot, bruised, perhaps 20 at most. And the way she looked at him, it wasn't fear. It was desperation. Not just for herself, but for something greater. Someone else. She slammed into his fence like it was the last thing that was real to her world. Shaking, bloody, half-naked. And death followed her behind. For men, armed and firm, tracking like they were hunting. One of them referred to her as belongings. That was when Luke realized. This wasn't simply danger. This was rot. The kind that festers in quiet, unnoticed by good men because it's easier to turn away. He turned away once. Years before. Never again. They quote regret becomes less sharp over time. That some hurt numbs. But there is a silence men opt for. And another imposed by the things they failed to halt. Luke lived with both. And when he pulled the trigger, it wasn't merely to protect her. It was to give voice to the question that had troubled him more than 10 years. What do I become if I do nothing? Now he was on his porch, the rifle still warm, smoke lingering in the summer air. And for the first time in 12 years, Luke breathed softly 3 words he'd hidden deep. Not today. And perhaps this time he meant it. The girl was named June. He didn't know anything else. Now she slept on his worn couch, covered in a wool blanket, her body bruised, her ankle purple and swollen, lips cracked and bleeding from the sun. Luke had no idea what he was doing. He could repair a fence, skin a deer, but this, tending to an injured human, that was another thing. He filled a glass of water and placed it on the crate he used as a coffee table. Then he simply sat there, observing her breathe. Her inhales were deep and unsteady, as if even her lungs did not have confidence in the air. And those eyes, they tormented him, because once upon a time, long ago, he had seen eyes just like them. Sarah Mercer, 14 years old, his little sister, disappeared one summer evening like smoke on the wind. They said she eloped, but Luke recalled the whispers. A man with scars in a wagon. Questions posed too late. That was 12 years ago. Now here was June, this battered, frightened girl, looking as though she'd clawed her way out of the same blackness Sarah had vanished into. Coincidence? Perhaps. But Luke didn't believe in those anymore. He rubbed his face and looked out the window. Dust filled the air. Ward's men had retreated for now. But they'd be back. He could sense it like a storm building in his bones. And most of all, he still didn't know what he was fighting. Before she lost consciousness, June had mumbled something that made him shiver. They own me. They own us all. He didn't demand to know who they were. He already knew. He'd heard that voice before. In soldiers too shattered to sleep, in girls who took cover in haylofts, in people who lost faith in justice because justice never arrived. Luke stood, checked his rifle once more. He had no idea what war he was walking into. But this time he wasn't walking away. June stirred before dawn. A soft sound, like someone trapped between a dream and a nightmare. She tried to sit up, flinched, and grabbed her ribs. Luke moved slowly, carefully. "You're safe," he said gently. "For now." She looked at him like she was seeing a ghost. Her eyes jumped to the windows. And then she rasped through cracked lips, "You shouldn't have helped me." Luke gave a half-smile, shrugging. Too late now. She closed her eyes as if she hoped the world would just vanish again. Then, hardly audible, she muttered something that lodged in Luke's ribs like a knife. "They're coming for me, and they'll kill you too." He didn't bother to ask who. He already knew the sort. What he wanted to know was why. And when June explained, the reality hit him like a punch. Ward wasn't merely a crank rancher with deep pockets. He was operating something uglier, organized, ruthless. A ring, she referred to it. Girls kidnapped from nowhere towns like hers, enticed with offers of work, food, shelter. Promised none of it. They hold us in the old mill west of Shell, she said. 12 girls. Perhaps more. Last I had heard, they're relocating us further west. Somewhere no one returns from. Luke's stomach churned. 12 girls, Sarah's age when she disappeared. And then June spoke one additional thing. A name. The type that lingers with you whether you wish it to or not. One of the girls. Her name's Ruth. 14. She hasn't seen her mama in 6 months. That was all. The moment it all blew open, Luke slumped into a frayed chair like his legs buckled. Ruth. Sarah had once had a friend, Ruth. They'd braid one another's hair on the porch, overeat watermelon, share hushed fantasies of escaping this dusty nowhere town. Now one of them was gone, and perhaps the other was stuck in that mill. Luke clapped his hands over his eyes. What if Sarah never escaped? What if she'd been kidnapped just like June? And if that was true, how many others had disappeared with the world remaining silent? June wasn't a victim, though. She was a witness. And now she was his burden. Luke rose, gazed west. He didn't have a badge. No support. No well-thought-out plan. But he had a rifle. And a motive. And for the first time in 12 years, that was sufficient. The abandoned old mill outside of Shell had been such for years. At least so everyone thought. But Luke was aware otherwise now. He left June a day's rations and a note. Told her to keep the doors closed. If you hear hooves, he wrote, don't answer. Then he mounted his horse and rode out. The path was parched, cracked, and sun-blasted. The type of heat that makes your mind go weird. Buzzards circled overhead, as if they understood death wasn't far behind. When he crested the ridge over the mill, the sun had dropped low, bleeding orange along the back of the canyon wall. Luke went down flat on a rock, looked through a beat-up scope, and regulated his breathing. Guards. 2 at the front door. 1 pacing with a dog. Another slumped in a chair, spitting tobacco like he had no place else to be. But it was the rear window that caught Luke's attention. Metal bars. And behind those bars, there was a shadow that shifted. Then, faint fingers pressing up against the glass. Hesitant. Hopeful. Gone. There was someone in there. No. Somethings. Luke counted his rounds. Not sufficient. Not for a bout like this. He required a chink, an opening, something stealth. So he waited. Hours elapsed. The darkness gathered thick and heavy. That creepy quiet just before the storm. Then movement. A wagon came in under canvas. 1 driver. 2 riders, guns drawn. They talked to the guards, then pulled the wagon up against a side door. Luke couldn't see what was in it, but he could hear. Crying. Not hard. The kind that slips out when somebody's trying real hard not to make a sound. Luke's jaw clamped tight. Whatever this was, it was bigger than he'd imagined. Colder. More planned. And now that he'd seen it, he couldn't unsee it. He didn't sleep. Just remained there, staring. Listening. Hour after hour stripped away another layer of decay. Men handling people like freight. Young girls gliding like specters. And that wagon never returned. As morning broke, so did his determination. Not because he had a plan. Not because it was intelligent. But because turning his back would make him the man who turned his eyes away again. He rode hard. At noon, he caught up with Marshall Reed. Told him everything. June. The mill. The wagon. The hand on the window. Left nothing out. And for once, someone believed him. By sundown, they had a quiet team. Armed. Focused. Not seeking a fight, but prepared for one if it emerged. When they broke into that mill, what they discovered would leave every man there scarred. 14 girls. Some little more than children. Starved. Shaken. But alive. And Ruth. She was real. Not Sarah's old friend, but someone's daughter. Someone's baby. Just a kid. Seeking her way home. Luke bore her out in his own arms. Later, people questioned him, why now? After all these years? Luke offered them the only response he had. Because I remembered who I used to be. And I got tired of running from him. Sometimes the most difficult battle isn't battling evil. It's confronting yourself and deciding to be better than you were yesterday. So here's the question for anyone still watching. If you noticed a hand behind bars, would you walk away? Or would you stop and make it your cause too? Perhaps this world does not require more heroes. Perhaps it needs more people who don't look away. If tales like these still resonate with you, if they leave something in your chest, don't scroll on yet. Hit that like button. Subscribe, because we've got more stories coming, ones that remind us of who we were and who we still might be.